Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Long time no see.
I'm telling you guys, I literally ran out of there, got through the New York traffic, and thought, wow, an hour and 45 minutes in traffic. I could have missed my flight. And Jeff, I was like so excited to talk to you today because of everything I learned last week.
Well, it was amazing to see you, and we had really. So what we're referring to is a Spring 25 AI Con, a conference which will explore the effects of AI on communications, and we brought together a whole group of interesting people and who shared how AI is affecting their both their professional life, their personal life, and really how they're adopting or perhaps not adopting into an AI lifestyle.
Well, and Jeff, I think what happened was the multiple topics that you picked as you're curating this event with Joe was that you wanted to show that AI is an all instance, but more importantly, the communication of how we use AI in our everyday instance, in our business, even in this new age of discovery of how AI is working alongside with us. I found the most interesting bridge that you were trying to cross over was the innovator's dilemma with AI, that all of us, whether we're innovating in home, innovating in our business, in our finances, that there is a true dilemma with this.
Yeah, and in the in the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, there's some nice case studies about businesses that may have seen disruption on the horizon, but chose not to disrupt their business in order to continue doing what they're doing, and ultimately they paid the price for it. During the conference, there was a session where I brought out the fact that Google, they've been disrupted by AI, and now Google had an early lead. They were doing amazing things 10 years ago, but with the launch of OpenAI with ChatGPT, and then with Perplexity, it was Perplexity's success. And if you're not familiar with Perplexity, do check out perplexity.ai. The ability for Perplexity to be a true search engine, because up until recently, when you wanted to search on Google, you actually had to speak Google. Let's face it.
Yeah,
You had to ask a question in a language that Google understood. And consumers, we actually got used to the fact that the first so many links were useless because they were paid advertising links, where the more money you pay, the higher the likelihood that your term will associate with a competitive term that the person is searching, or maybe
that SEO spend that everyone paid, or the backlinks, and I always believed that's not the way we do it. We're humanly conditioned by this platform in order for us to do it that way. It's not how the platform was originally set up, but it's like how they created commerce with it, right?
And what was amazing was when Perplexity launched and you started asking questions in English, all of a sudden, not only did you get an answer that was not subject to how much money someone was spending to be part of that answer, but then it anticipated questions afterwards. Like if you ask, what is mitosis? It would then anticipate follow-up questions to someone who's researching mitosis. And that's when Perplexity took away 1% of the traffic of Google. That was a major gotcha. And so, Google is facing that innovator's dilemma even to this very day. But they've now, at least, if you go on Google, you'll start to see Perplexity-like answers coming through, and their ad revenue business is being disrupted. I'm not saying it's going to zero. I mean, there's some companies whose half-life is so long that they may have died and no one's going to know about it. And so, we don't give out any type of investment advice here on this LinkedIn Live.
Let's just not doing that. Let's put the disclaimer out there.
No, absolute disclaimer. But when you you take that same paradigm shift and you look at how AI has been introduced to our day-to-day lives. So one of the things that came up is, we were talking to educators and how AI is being used in schools and used by themselves. We had a friend who's a chef who was talking about cooking with AI, and the whole thing is that it's, as we go through life, there are times when we are very embracive to new things, and there are times when we're stuck in our way. And I just go back to this old, to the original series of Star Trek when I think of Scotty. And if there was a question about it, I'm sorry, Scotty. The engineer is a little more dynamic. I'd say McCoy, the doctor, who would say, his typical comeback is, "I'm a doctor, not an engineer. I'm a doctor, not this." And so he puts himself in that vertical. And so when you look at how how available AI tools are now to the everyday consumer. There's some people who are starting to play and say, "Oh, check this out, check this out,
Right.
check this out," and other people who just say, "No, not my thing," because they don't feel qualified or otherwise putting any time, effort, or energy into it. And when they slowly discover on their own pace how powerful this is, that's disruptive. And the other part of it is most businesses, not every business in the world has adopted AI at any level. There's some companies that are AI that are positive toward it, but they don't allow their employees to use it on their desktops. They don't allow them to use it at work. They're worried about privacy, deep fakes, many
Right.
things from a security perspective. And there are other companies which are saying, bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. And for every company that's denying it, they have to be aware that they're being disrupted because
Right.
their competition, more likely than not, is bringing it on. And so, because I was thinking through this paradigm shift with virtualized conversations. I mean, the
Yes.
whole thing about vCon is, because we were, when I look at the evolution of communications, to talk about innovators, dilemmas, and disruption. So, a book that I haven't published yet that I've been
Yes,
working.
I told him to publish this to everybody. Like I literally tell him every single time, like publish the book.
But there's another book which which I haven't spoken to you about yet, which I started working on about 20 years ago. It's called Fear, Greed, and Disruption, and it's
Wow.
and it's all because those are the three those became my three
The
favorite
drivers.
words. Because when you normally, if you hear the phrase fear, greed, disruption, it sounds negative, but in
Right.
fact, when those words align, that means that something magical is happening in the ecosystem because
Yes.
incumbents are fearful of change. Disrupt the incumbents, they don't want to be disrupted. They don't want to.
Mhm.
They're greedy. They want to maintain their market share.
Right.
And ultimately, the disruption comes when a new technology allows startups to start building market share. And so, for since 1995, in different phases, the whole communications industry has been through that phase, and it's been remarkable. And about 5 years ago, when virtualized conversations were first being thought about, and in 2021, when they first surfaced as a file format, at least the possibility of one, AI and robot food was not even on anyone's. Computer scientists have been thinking about this for a long time, but not call it the everyday person.
Right.
And it's just this coincidence that at the Internet Engineering Task Force, this file format for conversations gets introduced more than a year and change ahead of OpenAI coming out
Right.
with ChatGPT. But these days, if you now look at what does it mean for a large language model that's available to businesses and consumers to readily understand conversations, it starts opening up so many things. I mean, it will ultimately redefine how businesses operate, how knowledge is transferred, how
Right.
businesses communicate internally with their employees, with their customers, with their vendors. It will also have a very subtle impact on how we do external communication, even on a personal level. Imagine that you have a vCon service. We don't have to call it a vCon service, but an ability to be to get an update every day if you're doing sales of these are the promises you just made these 17 people you spoke to today,
Right.
or last week here 32 people you promised to get back to about these issues. Share an update, and you're sharing the update with an AI, but at least that AI is acting as your as
As your
your
communicator.
yes. And so now you're thinking, why is this not so obvious? Because it's not. Because if I tell you that there's a file format for conversations to connect the dots, that all of a sudden now we have a new way to communicate internally in a company. What?
Right.
Or let's talk about call centers. The lowest
Or use
hanging
it in your profession, right? I mean,
right.
be
And
able to improve on what you're doing now, but be better at it.
right. And so if you look at like using virtualized conversations, just for companies that are in the industry of recording conversations with customers, whether you're doing anything from emergency response, you're dealing with regulated industries in banking, in finance, and in medicine, or you're just dealing with everyday customer support. You're calling Delta Airlines and their call's answered right now by saying, "Hi, this call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes." There's no opt out. There should
Yeah.
be an opt out, but in all those cases, we're being recorded and we know it, right? And
Right.
so yes, we have. There's a whole other conversation about giving permission. for and consent for recordings and giving consent,
Or
taking away
data.
consent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just look at you run a call center. Let's say you service I don't know 100 customers out of that call center. You have a few people dedicated to the top customers, and you have a few people that work for everyone else.
Right.
Right. Now, what if I could tell you that when you recorded conversations between your call center agents and the people they're talking to, you have a multi-level depth of value created. You could use those vCons that you're recording for training purposes to teach your future call agents proper procedures. You could use those vCons to review the performance of those agents answering the calls. You could also use those same vCons on a customer-facing report to share to your customer or your customer's customer insights, like what your customers are saying, what are they looking for, what are their issues, what do they want to buy, what do they want to sell. And it's because once you have a stored conversation, there's a lot of depth associated with what can be done. And ultimately, and this is the hard part, it's up to our imagination. Mm-hmm. This is not a one size fits all. This is like, here's a format, here are tools, build what you want. And right. So when you're introducing new technologies, and so, I was very early on appreciating the value of talking on the internet. Now, I did it as a hobbyist. And 30 years ago, I was spending time on my personal time on a computer with a headset on, a multimedia computer, talking to people around the world because I enjoyed it. And it was fascinating to me. And in October of 95, about 6 months or so after I started getting into it, I created, out of my own passion, not for commercial purpose, but something called Free World Dial-Up. It was the first network of people who allowed and facilitating phone calling from the internet through their home telephone line for third parties. So that if you lived, I don't know, in Utah, and maybe you're, I don't know, and you're living in Provo, and you have friends in New York City, you could use the internet to bypass long distance calls and make a local phone call. But I also had a person in Jakarta, Indonesia, a friend of ours who actually wrote a lot of the software. And so if you wanted to place a call into Jakarta, trust me, it was dollars per minute back then.
Oh, yeah.
The internet, it was free and this was just an experiment. And that type of disruption of bypassing long distance and using that on the internet, that became the business model for thousands and thousands of companies for years. In fact, for some companies still today.
Right.
But my driver for that was the passion to communicate. And fast forward many years later, now in whatever the market cap of telecom is these days. Prior to the meltdown, it was over $2.5 trillion. I don't know what it is today. I'm not looking, but I'll just say that 80% or so of the core global telecom market is derived from voice over IP and its derivatives.
Yes.
And there was
it's a result of that shift and disruption that you have today, Jeff. I think a lot of people don't understand the history of you being the founder behind Vonage, you being that innovation behind this entire industry.
I drove it. Thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of other people helped make it happen. A lot of engineering was needed. A lot of money, billions and billions of dollars was spent upgrading. Hyperscalers for the last 20 years have benefited from the growth of IP communications. But that's all to say that I saw that then. And this introduction of virtualized conversations, and this is a big statement, I believe it's bigger. It's like it has a potential. The introduction of virtualized conversations and vCons as they get adopted has the potential to have a bigger impact to global telecom, the introduction of internet telephony. Why? Because it's not just telecom. Until yesterday, if you were a service provider, the reality was that when the phone call ended, the conversation ended. In this brave new world, when you hang up the phone, the conversation just begins. Because now we start to process that metadata, stuff that we've never, ever looked at before. And that starts to drive things forward in a way that is just unbounded. So so that with that, I have a couple of events. I'm doing an event in Bentonville, Arkansas this week. Literally in the backyard of Walmart headquarters. Literally we're in the backyard, and I'm bringing together a very interesting multidisciplinary group of speakers from the world of supply chain, logistics, from AI and telecom, and we're looking at the world. And so you have a group of different people from different industries looking at the future together, and that's happening on Wednesday, April 9th. And then April 22nd to 23rd, 24th in Hyannis, Massachusetts is a game stopper. It is going to be the first ever conference globally on virtualized conversations, and it's going to be where many businesses will remember they were at, and there will be people who wish they were there. This industry is still relatively small. We do have folks from various parts of the world attending who'll be there in person. And what this is all about is first learning. We're all about learning, connecting, sharing, and engaging. So on April 22nd, there's a workshop. So if you, it doesn't matter whether you really know what a virtualized conversation is or is not, but if you want to be part of this next big thing and have a fundamental understanding of it, please join us. And so we have theory and practice. So we're going to look at the technology, what it's all about, and then people who built applications will show what they're building. The next day is an industry stand-up. There is an emerging industry, and I've invited people from across the board literally to come and talk about what they're doing. These are not sales pitches. This is more like info pitches. Like, okay, you've been working on this, and you feel comfortable enough to talk about it. Well, let's talk. Let's look at your perspective. Let's hear you, and help you connect to other people you may not have met who are doing amazing things.
And their contribution, guys, allows you to see it from different point of views, right? You can have someone who's super mature, someone totally immature. You could even see someone who's actually applying it and give you real world, real time feedback.
And then the piece de resistance is going to be on the final day on the 24th of April. It's the first ever interop for people building and working in the vCon ecosystem. And having hosted two of the SIP bake-offs years ago, I can tell you how amazing it is to be around people with production-ready code who are looking to do interops with other people. And yes, they compete. I mean, but understand at this period of time in the industry, we're dealing with co-opetition, which, as my friend Blake Irving would have introduced to me back in '96, is basically cooperation amongst competitors. Not about collusion, but it's like if you have ideas on how to make stuff work, and you're doing something and I'm doing something, because one of the core benefits of standards is interoperability. So yeah, we need to have operability before this interoperability, but we certainly want to facilitate that. So April 24th is for people who have code to test. They're invited to participate, and if you want to, arguably, there are going to be maybe a few people who create code to test while they're with us on the first 2 days. And
yes, we're trying to protect your IP, everybody. We want to make sure we're ensuring that there's no sneakiness about it, but we want you to be in a room with people who can say, I've done this is what I've done. We can see it, test it, and then of course give you feedback.
Right. And so that's what this is about. And so I've been focused on this event this month back since September last year, because when I hosted the last Font Evolution, which is the name of the event I'm doing in Bentonville, I realized the coming of age, or the early signs of an industry about to happen. And that's why I'm dedicating the time, April 22nd to 24th, to give light to Spring vCon. And so for those of you who may remember, I did host the VON conferences for about 11 years. And VON stood for Voice on the Net and Video on the Net, depending upon your perspective. It's at VON that I know the industry kind of got born, and many companies got acquired, went public, did good things. People got jobs, got funded. Also, that's where Vonage launched. That's where many companies launched. And yeah, I may have done that. And Vonage stood for the age of voice on the net. And it won't be much of a stretch to talk about a service provider who will call themselves vConage, which will be the age of vCons on the net, because I think that it's for someone who wants to have a technical term as a service provider, vConage, it doesn't really roll off the tongue, but it's kind of state of the art in terms of what's possible. And that's where we're at. It's like, are you going to be more like McCoy and say, I'm a doctor, not an engineer, and you can wait for someone else to come to your company? Hello, what are you selling? Right. Oh, I don't need that. Or maybe your team will bring this in because it's natural and organic for them to do it. or you're going to take the lead and say, this is something I've got to look into, because this is not just for service providers, equipment vendors. This is for businesses. This is a strategy. And let's face it, if you do strategy work, if you do strategic advisement, if you do integration work, this is the time to learn what's out there, because the AI revolution is upon us. There's no going back. I don't believe that is not going to disappear. It's like it's like someone in I don't know, in 1990 telling me that databases, spreadsheets, and word processing is just going to disappear. Even in 2025 on Google, maybe free-ish,
right?
But we do have sheets, we do have docs, we have PowerPoint, we have many things, and how we access that data. And if for people older who grew up with spreadsheets being something new and innovative and cool, you could look at the whole integration of vCons as being data points inside of a spreadsheet, and the what if analysis could be the dashboards that you create from the underlying data. And that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're talking about at these events. And more importantly, I'm looking to get the word out. So people that are technically curious, who want to have a better handle on where the future is, because the stock market's up, it's down, really down. But that does not take away from innovation. That does not take it away.
That's the perfect breeding ground for innovation, though, Jeff, because I think a lot of people get forced to kind of status quo versus where they ask a better question. That curiosity is lost when people aren't engaging in what I consider something new, advantageous, whether you're familiar with it or not, guys. That's where curiosity allows you to become innovative.
Yes, and it's that curiosity that's going to drive the next wave of opportunity. And so in this AI enhanced world, take off all the hype you want, there's going to be change, positive change, and opportunity. And so the dilemma we face is, do we look at what's in front of us, or do we ignore it? And for those people with the courage to be positively disruptive, they're going to actually induce fear in their competition. Because the other cool part about this is that no longer does an individual or a multinational corporation have to throw millions or tens of millions or lots of millions of dollars into an AI model to train it how to use its proprietary file format to capture conversations and do stuff. It's actually free. Now, it costs money to do the infrastructure, it costs money to do the development. But the fact that OpenAI, ChatGPT or Claude, you can open up a window and say, show me the Python source code for a web server. If you ever wonder why is that possible, it's possible because these LLMs actually read the IETF standards and understand them. And so if you were to take a transcript from our conversation right now, convert it to a vCon, and start asking for insights on it, your mind might be blown just a little bit. And it's that excitement and that opportunity that I really hope other people start to get wind of, because this market is really big. It is a lot of opportunity to learn, to train. I gave myself the title of Chief Evangelist Officer of the vCon Foundation, because CEO, you think's one thing, but it's really to evangelize, to learn, to teach, and help others get on the bandwagon.
Right. And Jeff, again, everybody, this is this week in Arkansas. We're going to be there, and we want you to be available to be open. If there's people that that are local to the area, we'd love to have them as well. But it really is a coming together of innovative minds who are curious to see how they can take a conversation just like the one that Jeff and I are having and actually say, well, what could we have said different? What questions did Charlene not ask? What did Jeff, share that could have had more context to it? It tells us what our audience is needing to hear and listen to, so we can connect. And
that's communication. Actually, my ChatGPT, because I call my ChatGPT Purple. Purple is pretty direct, because if I were to give this conversation to Purple, knowing that I'm talking to you and knows I spoke to Charlene, and I've trained Purple on all about vCons, all about supply chain integrity, transparency, and trust, it will get on me and say, Jeff, you had time to explain this, this, and that. You should have. Or perhaps you would have responded to Charlene a little bit better, or maybe you should have put a plug into your fall events, because you remember that because people might be busy this month and they want to know that on September 15th, going to be in Washington for Vine Evolution, or in October 21st to 23rd, will be somewhere for fall vCon. I mean, that's the type of feedback it could give me.
Right. And guys, this is part of the relationship building, right? A lot of people think AI is just one dimensional. It's not. It's to really help us in our current relationships and how we communicate. And that's the power of what Jeff's doing with the rest of the world coming together, not only in Arkansas, but also up in Cape Cod. And then, of course, throughout the country, these next couple of events are happening in the fall. But Jeff, we're going to go ahead and post the link inside of our live so that everyone can register. I know there's some people messaging us, free world dial up. Scotland is saying, sounds like you've got a book to write on the pioneering passion. Yes, Jeff, he hears it loud and clear, right? Scott, you have hit the nail on the head there. Jeff knows he's got a couple of books that I keep telling him, you got to publish that one. That is going to be the best. But, you know, what do you do when you have an inventor like him who's just multifaceted, has so many things that he's innovating at the same time? He's using this time to really launch what I consider the next evolution of communications.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's a big mantle to carry, but at the same time, I do hear you. And I do encourage people to be positively disruptive. I mean, fear, greed, and disruption are things which I observed. You may call it something different, but being able to see the opportunity and do something, you know, and that's the thing, not just observe it, but take action. That's where the magic is. And
it is. Well, thank you again, Jeff. And I can't wait to see you this week. And Lauren, thanks all for you do. You are just, she makes it happen, Jeff. Like without Lauren, I tell you, a lot of things will not happen for us.
That's true. Lauren is the behind the scenes superstar.
Yes, she is. All right, Jeff, I will see you this week, my friend.
Thank you. Safe travels.